Welcome. Thank you for coming. Super excited about today's program. Just a couple of things. We have two donation jars in the back. One is for the Steeple Event Center and one is for our foundation. The foundation is who pays for these performers to come. So, without any further ado, I would like to introduce Michael J Mooney, and he has something very urgent to share with us.
$3. $3 a day. $3 a day is our wage for working their filthy minds. We can't feed our families on $3 a day. My name is Michael Mooney. I come from Dublin. I've been here in this country 7 years. I've come down here today from Leadville. By God, we need your help. Every week we lose men in those mines. The rock falls on us, crushing us. That's how I broke my leg. Do you think the company paid for me doctor bills? The powder explodes before we expect it, burning us, blinding us. Just yesterday, the cable on the ore bucket broke. The sound of a man falling 200 feet is a sound we don't want to hear. And just this morning, the bosses, they issued an order. No talking in the mines. No singing. You filthy Irish. Work in silence. And that was it, friends. That was the straw that broke the camel's back. The boys dropped their picks. And they said, Michael, we're walking. We left the mine. We went to the Robert Emmett and we called out the boys and out they come. We went to the O'Donovan Rossop, we called out the boys and out they come. And we marched all day from mine to mine. until there were 5,000 of us. Imagine it, 5,000 miners marching through Leadville in silence. Declaring to the bosses and the silver barons that working people have a limit. So friends, I'm here because we have a great strike on our hands. It could be weeks, months, even years. But we won't give in. We're asking for $4 a day. Better safety codes so the men aren't dying. An 8-hour workday instead of 10 or 12. And the right to form a union. Do you think we're asking for too much? No. Us immigrants, we may not have the whole flag, but by God, we've earned a corner of it. If we can get $4 a day, the 13-year-old can go to school where he belongs, and he won't have to follow me into the mine. But friends, we're up against it. Don't believe what the papers are printing. Have you read what they're printing about us? They call us Molly McGuires. Do any of you know what that is? It's like saying we're terrorists. But this is a peaceful movement. We won't hurt anyone or damage anything, you see. And Governor Pitkin, do you know what he done? Governor Pitkin declared martial law in Leadville, martial law. 400 soldiers now parade in the streets, arresting miners on vagrancy laws and forcing us to work in chain gangs. That's what they're doing now. So the boys, they said, Michael, go to Canyon City. The people there have big hearts. They'll help us. So here I am, friends, in this beautiful church. Because our children are hungry. My wife, she said, don't come back here, Michael. They're going to hang you. Stay in Canyon City. But I'd be heading back tonight because the boys need me. And so, friends, I hope that you'll help us, that you'll offer your support. And I want to say something. I want to say thank you for listening to me story and giving me hope, you see, through your eyes. And me heart's full today because I know you'll help us. And I have a gift for you to say goodbye. I don't have anything to give you. We Irish are poor. All I have is my corncob pipe. And God knows I've been needing that. So my gift is the gift of words. We have our own language. What did you know what it's called? The Gaelic. And Irishman. The Gaelic. Friends, it sounds like music. Like a stream over rock. But the English came to our country and tried to take it. They passed laws all over Ireland, English only. English only. Have you ever heard of such nonsense? We kept our language. Tried to take our culture, our land, even our faith. And we kept all of it, you see. So we gift. Thank you. Is a gift of words. Now me 13-year-old, when we get our $4, they'll go to school where they belong. And there they are in the back, you see. So we gift to all of you is an ancient Gaelic, Celtic blessing. And today, as St. Patrick's Day approaches, it will bring you goodwill. Here it is. Gonare un borla, giaguch, slime. The meaning of it, it means your life force, the flame that burns within you. May it be strong. Goodbye, my friends. Thank you, everyone, for your amazing attention. I was stunned by the focus that we all had. And I'm going to step out of character. I'm just grateful to be here in this beautiful church, in this historic town on the Arkansas River. And started my day in Puebla, will end my day back up. I'll be up in Leadville tonight. Not my coming to me. And it's my favorite part of the state, by the way, is the Arkansas Valley. It's just, people are amazing and remind me of my roots in Western Pennsylvania. And visit me, they always want me to take them to Vail and Aspen. But I always take them to Pueblo and Leadville. Because that's the heartbeat of the state. So anyway, I'm just happy to be here. I want to use the rest of our time to do a couple things. One is I just have some slides to show you. This is the history of this person I've been researching for 22 years of my life. I thought it would just be a dissertation topic, and it ended up being my life's work. And then I want to open this up for your questions and thoughts. I would love to hear what's on your mind as you absorb the story of Mooney, as he told his story. This happened in 1880 in Leadville, exactly as the character described it. And it's a story that no one in Colorado has ever heard of until I started doing this. But it's an important story. And my favorite line in the monologue comes right out of a journalist transcribed one of Mooney's speeches that he gave in Leadville shortly after the strike. In that speech, he said, "We may not have the whole flag, but by God, we have a corner of it." Think about that line. I think that's the line that hardworking immigrants have always pulled from their hearts, right? We've worked, and we've earned at least a corner of that flag. So anyway, let me share a few slides, and then I want to leave at least the last 20 minutes for dialogue with all of you. So I kind of break it into thirds. The first third is acting, the second third will be slides, and the last we'll open this up for conversation. Quite a turnout too. I was, in a small town, I was hoping we might have 15, 20 people. Look at this. So thanks for coming out on a January afternoon to soak in the story. And as residents of the Arkansas River Valley, this is a story you need to know. It's an important story. So let me share some slides, and then this is not just a story of the strike and the character Mooney. It's also a story of Leadville really as a whole and an ethnic community. Leadville had the largest Irish immigrant community really between San Francisco and Chicago. I don't know if anyone knew that. Not today, but in the 1880s. It was a massive community. In fact, that at any given point in the 1880s, the early 1880s, there were upwards of 3,000 people in Leadville who had been born in Ireland. 3,000. That's more people than there are today in Leadville. So this was a massive community, and people coming from Ireland across the country, Irish dignitaries, they always stopped in Leadville. People like Oscar Wilde gave a speech up in the Tabor Opera House. So Leadville was really an important ethnic space. And the Irish at that time were the most working class community out there. They were at the bottom of the totem pole. So they were fighting their way up. They had no choice. And so they were the leadership behind this massive strike. And it wasn't a strike that they chose. It was a strike that they really believed they didn't have a choice, because they were dying, they were being maimed, and they weren't making enough to survive. Leadville was a death trap at that time. So in the midst of the research, I came across this Potter's Field, Pauper Cemetery. If you've been to Leadville, if you know Leadville, the Evergreen Cemetery is the main cemetery. How many of you know Leadville fairly well? I knew that would be the case, because this is right on the Arkansas. In the back of that cemetery is a massive pauper cemetery of roughly 7,000 graves. 7,000. And these were mostly burials that happened in the 1880s, in the early 1880s, in Leadville's heyday. And so you were buried in the pauper cemetery if you couldn't afford the $15 fee for regular burial. So people who were destitute, people who were without resources, without family, ended up in the pauper section. So when I was brought there by a close friend, I just couldn't believe it. What I was looking at, the graves are all sunken. And there's no markers, there's very few markers. And the average age, if you imagine this stretching for acres through the forest. And the next time you go there, the next time you drive through Leadville, make a point to stop there. Wait till the snow melts. Make a point to stop there. And don't just see well, you have to go see this grave, but we have built a massive memorial. Has anyone visited the memorial up there? Yeah, you have to see it. And it's 7 years of work. So of all these people, the average age is 22. 22. Half of them are babies and young children. So there's acres that are only babies and stillborn. So it's a very powerful space, and I was determined that this space would be not just a space of recognition and grieving, but also a space for education. It's a space where people can learn about social hierarchy, can learn about labor, can learn about immigration. These are important issues. So the memorial has drawn thousands to this space as an education space. And this is what it looks like today. The graves, they're in rows. They were laid out in very orderly fashion. The trees have since all grown up around the graves. When the burials took place, it was clear cut. But this is kind of what you see now. Many of the graves were marked with a crude wooden slab like this, and the name was etched on the slab with the date of death. So some of those slabs are still there, but largely this is kind of what you see and what you find. And since our efforts to build the memorial, a lot of descendants have placed new headstones at there, because you can use the records and find out where your ancestors buried. So descendants have come with new headstones to place them there. That's been really rewarding to see. So I'm going to go through a little bit of the history and then make sure we have time for discussion, which is the fun part. So 7 years ago, I was telling someone about these graves, and most of them are Irish in the Catholic section, and someone said, the Irish government should know about this. And I said to my friend, I said, why would the Irish government care about all these pauper graves in the little town of Colorado? I don't see the point. So he emailed the consulate's office, and it was a really aggressive email. One of those emails you don't want to be CC'd on. But I was CC'd on it, oh boy. But it worked. The consul general showed up in Lindo a couple of months after that email to see the cemetery. And the town rolled out the red carpet, treated him like he was the president of his invasion. And this is their annual St. Patrick's practice parade, which they have in September. Has anyone ever been to the practice parade? Yeah, every September. Isn't that a great tradition? Well, why just have one St. Patrick? We can have two. Plus, it's pretty hazardous to march in March up in Leadville. So September is usually quite nice. So what they did is they delayed their St. Patrick's practice parade so it would coincide with his visit. And put him in this old fire truck. on the left, that's him. He's never been treated like, he didn't know what to do, so I said, Adrian, just wave. And we gathered at the pauper graves and made a commitment as a community to build this memorial. And in 2019, a couple of years after Adrian, the Irish ambassador to the United States came. This is him in the red tie. That's Adrian in the green tie. And by that time, by the ambassador's visit, the Irish government was fully on board with this memorial. It's so ironic. This memorial ended up, our first visit, we'll raise $10,000 and we'll have a little statue and a plaque. It ended up being $350,000, 200 of which the Irish government paid, $200,000. And the reason is the Irish government cares deeply about the diaspora, about people who left Ireland and went off into the world. 80 million people in the world today call themselves Irish. 80 million. I'm sure there's a few sitting here. So it's a massive diaspora, and they have a minister of diaspora in the government. And after this visit, they started giving us money. The idea grew. I found records with all the names of the people buried in those graves, and we decided we're gonna put names. We're gonna name all of them. They're all unnamed in the cemetery. We're gonna put their names on glass. That's what we did. They're now all named. Remember, these are the poorest of the poor. Destitute people. Desperate people. That's what I was trying to do in my monologue, is impart a sense of desperation. And when I reach out and say, we need your help. Mooney, I don't know that he ever came to Canyon City, but he went to Denver and pleaded for help. And the people gave lots of money to help the strikers during that time. So here's Mooney marching in the St. Patrick Practice Parade several years ago. But I was trying to get the people at the Manhattan Bar to care about the strike, but they didn't seem interested. There's Mooney, the only photo I've ever found of him. Even his descendants don't have a photo of him. So I managed to get, a genealogist put me in touch with his only living grandchild, who was 92. And she and I had several conversations before she passed. And the family didn't know anything about the story of the strike. He was so ostracized for leading this strike. And he was blacklisted. He couldn't get work anymore in Leadville. And what he did, he was proud of. He knew what he did was right, but the consequences were big. And he didn't want his children and his grandchildren to feel that stigma, so the story wasn't passed down. He kind of just kept it inside. And the family left Leadville. They went to Seattle. They went to Butte. He mined in Butte, Montana, and then Los Angeles. He died in Los Angeles. Here's the National Guard in Leadville, the Robert Emmett Mine, ironically named after an Irish patriot. Leadville was under martial law twice in the 19th century, even though these miners didn't commit any violence. That they weren't threatening anyone. They just wanted a living wage. They wanted to work in a place that had a semblance of safety to it. And they were also saying that in their public comments that working at 10,000 feet had a particular danger about it. And that's right, of course. Working at 10,000 feet, these are people who came from sea level. So when they had no idea what they were getting into when they showed up in Leadville. And it was a death trap. Epidemics, we found lots of epidemics that broke out up there. And this is Annunciation Church. This is the church that Irish immigrants built. One of the oldest Catholic churches in the state. Still stands there on the east side of town. With Mount Massive in the background. It's a beautiful view. Just an amazing structure. And if you know Leadville, this is Harrison, this is Main Street right here, north and south. The east side was the Irish side. The 6th Street was so Irish they called it the 6th Street Irish. And then the west side became Eastern European. A little bit later than the Irish, like 1890, lots of Eastern Europeans started moving to Leadville. Slovenians, Italians, Poles, Slovakians. And the Irish didn't want to share their church, their Catholic church. These are all Catholics. So they built St. Joseph's on the west side. And the Eastern Europeans never went on the east side, and the Irish never went on the west side. That's the history of Leadville. That's the history of America. Intense ethnic rivalries. But when they were underground, and when they went on strike, all those differences melted away. When they were on strike, they were together. They had to be, think about it. So I'll share a little bit more of the history. These are the ethnic groups in the 1880 census in Leadville. The numbers of men and women. And you can see that the Irish were by far the largest, by two to one larger than any other ethnic group up there. I found in the research, because the church records reveal the county of birth, the Irish county, so I was able to identify this. These are the marriage records and these are the baptism records. That about a third of them came from County Cork, and that's because there were copper mines there. On a very remote peninsula, on the southwest corner of the island, in a place called Allies. Hundreds and hundreds of miners came from that region to Leadville. So they're called the Corkonians, and that had a strong connection. And here's the jobs that the men did. There are over 1,000 Irish-born miners in 1880, and laborers. Look at these jobs. These are all the hardest jobs, except maybe for the saloon keeper. And then for women, there are much less women, about a 4 or 5 to 1 ratio. But you get a sense for the labor that women did at this time. Keeping house was just the most common. That was what married women were always listed as keeping house in the census. So keeping house just means that 221 were married. And married women were not allowed. There was a social ban on married women earning a wage. So of all these are what single women did. They were domestics and laundresses, and they ran boarding houses. That difficult work. So here's a photo of some domestics that the mistress of the house would have arranged to have had taken, because it was a status symbol to show how many Bridgets you had working for you, how many domestics worked for you. And so some of these women were quite young. The woman holding the child, I think, looks to me to be 15, maybe, years old. So this gives you a sense of the gendered labor that existed within the Irish community. And here's Mooney's grave. Ironically, he had quite a large grave because his children did very well. And when he died, they made sure that he and his wife were remembered. This is in Los Angeles. I visited there years ago. But if you're familiar with Ireland, here's where I'm talking about. Bear Peninsula, where those miners came from, the very southwest tip of the island. And there's a little village called Allies there. So in 2019, I flew to Dublin with my bike, and I cycled all the way, it took me 3 days, all the way to Allies to tell them about this history, of this connection with Leadville. And they sent a delegation last year, and now Leadville and Allies are sister cities. So you might think about a place in the world where lots of immigrants came to Canyon City from. And there might be an opportunity there for a sister city relationship. So I'm going to, I want to point is out. You can't read this because it's so small and I can't really blow it. I guess I can blow it up. Not really. This is a census report in 1880, and it's a boarding house listing all the boarders and lodgers in this boarding house. And they all were minors. And in the middle of this boarding house list was the gender column is M, and suddenly there's an F for female. And it stopped me in my tracks. So a woman named Helen Donovan from Ireland was 19 years old, living in this boarding house. Her occupation, minor. And in the 19th century, women were not even allowed, not only to not work in the mine, but weren't even allowed close to the mine. It was considered bad luck. And somehow this 19-year-old immigrant woman broke that barrier. And she's not trying to hide her gender. It's clear that she's telling the agent F, female. So I think this is a remarkable part of the story that there's no sign of her in any record anywhere. And she's likely buried in one of those holes, unmarked holes. So, a couple of pieces and then I'll open this up. Just give you an idea of the discrimination that the Irish faced. This is a Leadville Herald during the strike. By the way, you should know that Chinese miners faced even worse conditions than Irish miners. And many mining communities had what were called Chinese bands, and Leadville was one of them. So Chinese immigrants simply were not permitted to live in Leadville. They could not live there. And if someone tried to, they were threatened, and sometimes even faced violence. So the newspaper says the Molly Maguires is a euphemism for Irish, must find a reservation outside of Colorado. Leadville drove the Chinese out, but admits Molly Maguire. The discrimination was a bad one. I think that's so revealing, that quote about the ethnic and racial dynamics at that time. And skip through a lot. Here's the old church again, gives you see what it looks like today. Next to it is the rectory. And when I started my dissertation research in 2001, I just showed up in Leadville and went to the church. And they had these amazing records that I had access to. The Archdiocese has since closed access to the records. So I was so lucky to do this when I did it. And they could sense that I was a starving graduate student. So they gave me a key to the rectory, and I slept on the couch and spent the whole day looking through these birth and marriage and death records. And learned so much. Here's the old hospital, built in 1900, run by the Sisters of Charity of Leavenworth. These nuns were bold. They showed up at this mining camp. They decided that it has to be a hospital. They started collecting donations from miners. And can you imagine collecting enough to build a hospital? Before the hospital was built, before the doors and windows were on, someone just laid a main miner's body on the porch. And the nuns were like, well, the hospital's not finished yet, but we have to treat this person. So they just treated him anyway. And their motto was, they never turned anyone away, it didn't matter what religion or race. And they were true to that motto. Sisters of Charity. And so many of these nuns in early Colorado were deserving of recognition they never received. And then everywhere I give a talk, I'm often met with someone who has descendants in Leadville. And this woman approached me after one of those talks, and she said she had a great aunt and uncle who died in Leadville as babies, and the family doesn't know where they're buried. I said, what's the name? She said, O'Rourke. So I pulled out the records and looked for the O'Rourkes, and there weren't any. And as I was apologizing, I thought, maybe they're Rourke, because some of the Irish left the O in the ocean. So it was the Rourkes, and there they were. One was 2 days old, and one was 3 days old. And so I was able to take a photo of a plot that they're buried in and send it there. So this is the rewarding part of this work for me, is helping people honor lost loved ones. And here's what it looks like out there. So this is the road I cycled to get it. So it was almost like heaven, you know, except the hills, they didn't work. And I went to the Ali Mining Museum, and I was welcomed there. This is the director. And the next thing you know, I was at the pub. We walk up to the pub. There's one pub. And this is the statue at the memorial. Kneeling on one, he's facing Ireland, and there's some Celtic art on the harp. The harp is a sacred instrument in Irish culture, so that's why he has a harp. People have left coins and artifacts all around the base of the statue. It's almost like the living want to help the dead. So if you go there, well, again, wait till the snow melts, but if you go there, you'll see all these artifacts. You can see around the base an old shovel. People have left children's shoes from the early 1900s. All these artifacts people have just left there. There's the mayor after the sister city relationship happened. And I reached out to the Southern Ute Nation when we started the process because the Irish have a long history of being occupied and exiled and displaced. And I felt like it was necessary that we contact people who were displaced from the area and ask their permission for the memorial. So this is the cultural director of the Southern Ute Nation. And she came to a dedication and gave an amazing speech, and she talked about the number of indigenous children who were buried in unmarked graves. And she said something to the Irish audience, we come from strong people. And people were in tears. And so this is a photographer from Belfast who was there. And he gifted her with a photograph he took in the 80s of American Indian movement leaders in Belfast at the funeral of Bobby Sands, who was an IRA prisoner who died of hunger strike. And they're drumming at his funeral in Belfast, and she gifted this to Cassandra, as if to say to her there's a historical connection between the Irish struggle and the indigenous struggle. She was quite thrilled to have this. And this is the unveiling. Last September, we unveiled this whole thing. The ambassador came, Senator Bennett was there. There's my green-haired kid.
I have blue and purple hair.
Not blue and purple. and it's a new ambassador, the second ambassador to visit. And if you go to Leadville today, the Healy House has this new exhibit about the history of the Leadville Irish that my students, these are my students here. They worked on this exhibit all summer, and it's now on display. So if you go to Leadville, don't just see the memorial, but go to the Healy House, and please take a look at this exhibit. Here's what it looks like, friends, with all the names on glass. And the names at night are lit up. So it's quite a beautiful space. It's a spiral walk. You have to walk a spiral walkway to get up to the top. And there's a kind of a view from a distance. And here's a view from above, from a drone. And in Ireland, this story really caught fire. They called this the Lost Irish of Leadville. And this is an Irish Times article that was done. And, in Ireland, you won't meet a family in Ireland who doesn't have an ancestor who drifted off to North America and was never heard from again. It's just so common. Almost every family you meet has ask somebody. So this memorial has grown. It doesn't just represent the 1,300 souls whose names are on there, but it's now come to represent all of the lost Irish across North America, really across the world. And that's why it caught such attention in my view. And also because so many Irish immigrants died in industrial jobs, mines, digging canals, building railroads, tens of thousands. And this memorial sort of calls attention to that important chapter in American history of, I have 3 great-grandparents who died by trains. And that was part of what inspired me to, when I first saw the Pauper Cemetery, these are my people. And these are just a fraction of the Irish buried in Lakeville. There's thousands more, but they're marked, their names are known. We wanted to honor the ones who aren't known. And by the way, the non-Irish are also on the memorial. We don't want to leave anyone out. So Irish or not, your name is there. I think that's a very Irish thing to do, is to include. So, that's the story, and I'm sticking to it. and I'm going to use the rest of our time to hear from you. Questions, I'd love to hear your thoughts, and anything on your mind, whether it's about Mooney or about the larger story. Yes?
How long did the strike last, and what was the results?
So the strike was crushed. It only made it 3 weeks before, and the reason is they were arresting the strikers, treating them like criminals. So the men realized pretty quickly that they couldn't. As soon as the National Guard showed up, it started. The National Guard wasn't there to keep the peace and be neutral. The National Guard was there to smack. Horace Tabor was a big part of that. He had great political power at the time. He used that leverage to convince the governor that this wasn't just a strike of poor miners. This was an insurrection. This was an uprising. And he better send the soldiers. And the governor believed him. So the strike was not successful. And it took 16 years later, they struck again. And their wages, 16 years later, guess what their wages were? 3. And by the way, I hope you all enjoyed that opening line. I've been doing this monologue for 16 or 17 years, and it was so easy for me to think about the opening line. 3, and whenever I run into former students, because I always do this the first day of class for them, I often run into former students, and sometimes they give me 3. Someone back here, yes?
I just have a hard time fathoming this way of your presentation, and I have Irish family came here, they came here, they came here from Ireland to attend them, and they took up Moline, Illinois, Rock Island, Arsenal, and I have a Murphy on my side. I'm a Johnson, but I have Murphy on my side, on my mom's side. And so I went back there, and my uncle was showing me places where they were living in a car, where the Irish were living in cardboard shanties along the Mississippi River. And so my question is, what compelled these people, besides the family, to come? And you can see how severe and how adverse these conditions were. What compelled them to come here? And it's just like the migration of people coming from South America here. And you got the sanctuary cities and all that. If you go to Denver, it's just unbelievable. You see all these, and they're really working to get them off the streets and stuff, but it's kind of like another scenario of that. But from my point, I'm just wondering what compelled these people to weather these kind of conditions, and when they died, did they not have death certificates? Where did you get all your information? Did you go to the local library there, or did you go down to Denver, where Denver has an incredible history library for Colorado. So I guess I'm a question of Lynn.
Yeah.
You mentioned, I've never heard this word before, DIAS, diaspora, the Irish. I've never heard that before, and that's something new. Maybe you did mention it once, and that, I guess I'm trying to understand that, is that different for all the different people that were Irish that left, that for the reason that they came from, like you said you came from Dublin, my ancestor came from Graymore, Ireland. And as you know, Ireland had a lot of civil wars and stuff, and if you go back and try to trace stuff, a lot of that stuff was destroyed. I can go on and on and on, but that's it. That's the question.
Well, yeah, thank you. I hope I can remember all the questions. There's a lot there. I'll do my best. Yeah, diaspora is simply a term that refers to a people and a culture leaving their homes and expanding somewhere else in the world. For example, African Americans are part of the African diaspora because of the institution of slavery, and the Jewish diaspora because of the Holocaust. So the Irish diaspora was largely because of the famine, but not entirely. And so Irish immigrants didn't see themselves as voluntary immigrants. They saw themselves as exiles. They saw themselves as having been pushed out. So there's a big difference in mentality there. And so I love the connection you made between past and present. Not always, but in the majority of cases, migrants are coming from a desperate situation. And so, so there's a lot of similarities between today and this story. In my research in 1880, I found near Union Station in Denver, there was a tent camp of this is 1880. There were 300 people just living along the Platte River in tents, and most of them were Irish immigrants. So this generation who left the famine in the 1850s and showed up were absolutely in a state of complete panic and trauma. And there's even theories of intergenerational trauma that third, fourth, fifth generation still carry. There's lots of theorizing about how that plays out in our lives. But yeah, and your other question was sources. So for the names on the memorial, I found records in the library of who's buried in the unmarked sections. And so I was able to use those records. I was so grateful for them. But as far as my research, the main sources were the church records, census data, and the newspaper archive. I just went through legible newspapers almost on daily and absorbed all that. And then some families contributed things like letters and old photographs. And I was able to kind of piece together. If you do working class history, you have your work cut out for you. Think about it. The history of people who had means, who had resources and wealth, that's easy. There's not only a paper trail. Their house is probably preserved. There's a lot. But if you're dealing with working class history, you have to be creative. It has to come from the heart. So, thank you. Yes?
Irish from Galway, and they left because of the famine. And you were talking about in their home country, the English were prejudiced against the Irish, knowing the religion, but also the Irish people. And that's still going on. From there, they went to Durham County, England, as miners. And then they came to Pennsylvania as miners, Illinois as miners. They left Illinois because of the strife in the mine, what you're talking about. And talk about slave labor. It's incredible. They then went to Kansas, was able to get land. Miners are terrible. When Oklahoma opened up, they were part of the Cherokee Strip run for land, here again, the government takes from the Indians is to white, even though the Irish are probably the poorest of the whites. So the prejudice that we have today is continued on. I, as an Irishman, have felt that, my family's felt that throughout time. All of America, all a bunch of immigrants. For us to be prejudiced against today's immigrants is just as wrong as the prejudice against our Irish families of Czechoslovakia over in Rockdale and Florence. It's got to stop.
My mission's accomplished, we can go home. Yeah, thank you for not only for that message, which I strongly support, but sharing a bit about your own family history too. So many of these miners did come from the anthracite coal region of eastern Pennsylvania, so there's a strong connection there. And but thank you for that. Let's hear. We have time for a couple more, and then we'll wrap up. Go ahead.
So I have a question.
Yes.
The potato famine was about 1850, correct? So did these people, I've been to Ireland a few times.
Yes.
So were these people, they were coming, this was 1880, were they coming like after that? A lot of people came down,
Right.
but they must have come later.
Yeah. Yeah.
And why did they come in such numbers at that time?
Yeah, so Mooney was born during the famine, and so he was really a child of that generation. So a lot of the Irish in Leadville, the older ones would have fled the famine, but a lot of them left Ireland in the 1870s. There was another famine in the west of Ireland in the 1870s. Historians sometimes call it a mini famine, and it was concentrated in County Cork. So that's what brought so many of those miners from Ireland, from County Cork to Leadville. So very similar situation, Thank you. Do we have time for one or two more?
So when Moody went to Denver and was asking for help, obviously financial help, but was he also seeking like political help to help sway the societal view?
He was. They rented a big hall. Hundreds of workers came to support the cause. And then when Mooney walked out of the building, the Denver police arrested him. He spent the night in jail. And they released him the next day. They realized he hadn't committed a crime. They couldn't hold him. So he was released. And he went back. He did go back. The vigilantes were trying to hang him. And so the miners had to actually protect his cabin every night. They had to form like a cordon around his cabin to protect him. So I think, but thank you for that question. Yeah. And someone over here, yes?
Yeah, just how did you come across Mooney? If you kind of kept quiet about...
Yeah, thank you. Just in the newspaper accounts of the strike, it was a rabbit hole that I just fell into. I became enthralled with the story of the strike. And Mooney's leadership, he was an amazing leader. Even the silver company officials respected him because his message to the men was always, we are not violent, and stay sober and be careful how you present yourself in public. He understood, Mooney was what I call a working class intellectual. He didn't have a formal education, but he had a political acumen that was amazing. So he understood that men needed to present themselves in public in a way that would win over the public. And they did largely. After they had that march through Leadville, a few days later, the wealthier parts of Leadville decided they needed to have their own march. So they had their march through Leadville, and the miners kind of, watched that, and they called it the Army of Snobs. It was kind of like class warfare. But Mooney was just he's just consistent. he was young, he was only 27 when this happened, so he was a young man. So, yes?
So what were his final years like, and where did he die?
He died in West today, South Central LA. Lived there, his last year he lived into his 70s. Today that's young, but for a miner in the 19th century to make their 70s is rare, very, very rare. So, yeah, so I flew out there with my kid years ago and we found this stone, and I'm so happy to find it like a pilgrimage. And now I'm trying to, since his granddaughter passed, there's no more grandchildren, so I'm trying to be in touch with the next generation, which are about my age, and they're not as interested. They're investment bankers in London. They don't seem as enthralled with the story. But, thank you.